Lover's Moon, a novel by Mark Leslie and Julie Strauss. Read by the authors. Chapter 7. Michael. 1:48 p.m. "Should I go out and pick up a pack of condoms before I meet with her tonight?" I asked. Asking that made me feel like I was 17 again and about to go on my first date. Not only did Buddy give off an air of extreme discomfort, but he had a look on his face like I just offered him rotten meat for dinner. I realized two things immediately. One was that after almost a decade of living here, I didn't have any real friends in the city. I knew and regularly interacted with plenty of folks on a continual basis, but they were all people I had a working relationship with. The ones I connected the most with were Mac, my fantastic agent, and his assistant Anne. And while Mac's work helped propel my career forward, I would never mistake the gruff, crude, and aggressive man for a friend. Sure, he was responsible for getting me into 7-figure annual earnings as a writer, but I had no doubt that if I stopped producing, he'd drop me faster than a politician drops his promises. Anne was one of the sweetest and kindest people I'd ever met, and we got along like gangbusters. But it wasn't as if we were besties. I got along quite well with most of the staff at the Algonquin Hotel, which I'd been calling home for a little over a year now. Paul, one of the doormen, and I had regular conversations, but we only ever spoke standing in the front entranceway or just outside the hotel. Frighteningly, I realized that my closest friend in New York City, Buddy, a traveling salesman, didn't even live in the Big Apple. I saw him perhaps a half dozen times a year when he had business in the city. The second thing was, despite the fact Buddy was the single person I'd spent the most time in one-on-one conversations with for much of the last decade, I had never once shared anything truly intimate or related to my love life with him. Well, that part was easy. I didn't really have a love life. I had a work life and a writing life. And just a few years ago, my work life and writing life became the same thing. The only truly unique thing I did other than eat, write, and sleep was that I morphed into a gray wolf and romped around after sundown on all fours for about 10 days every month. At least it got me out of the house. But that thing that provided some variety in my life was also the thing preventing me from having any serious relationships. Nobody knew about my affliction, nor the special strength and sensory abilities I retained when in normal human form. So it would be extremely awkward trying to keep a long-term relationship when you have to pretty much disappear every night for a week and a half. "Oh, don't mind me, honey. I'll be out all night howling at the moon, sniffing other wolves' butts, and maybe stalking and devouring a few rabbits and other small rodents. But I'll be back early enough to have the coffee on for you before you wake up." Yeah, I didn't think so. I realized Buddy was still sitting there wordlessly, his bulbous nose still wrinkled in confusion and perhaps disgust, his eyebrows raised, and his eyes wide, making him look even more like Buddy Hackett. This might have been the longest I'd ever seen him at a lack for words. "This is a working relationship, right?" he finally asked. "Yeah. So why would you need condoms?" Well, I couldn't tell him I knew she had the hots for me because I smelled it off her, so I went with the other potentially obvious reason. After dinner last night, we walked and talked all night. The entire night. The conversation was stimulating and nonstop. We didn't even notice the time passing and that the sun was coming up. When you and I met, we regularly had nonstop conversations that lasted all night. That didn't mean we wanted to jump in bed with one another. I made an effort to keep a wry grin from sprouting on my face. Most of my conversations with Buddy were extremely one-sided affairs, particularly the longer ones. They were less of the back-and-forth variety of most verbal intercourse and more like a one-man show performing a monologue to a one-man audience. "This is different. She's sexy, I get it. But she's also a work contact. You can't confuse the intimacy of the interview and research this conversation was about with personal intimacy." "But we talked about more than details for my novel. We talked about ourselves. We shared things about our lives." "That was just a thing that salespeople do to make the customer feel more relaxed and comfortable. I do it all the time." People buy things from others they know, like, and trust. So the key to being a great salesperson, and trust me, this is my entire livelihood, is charming them. We're all at least a bit narcissistic. The most absolutely captivating thing often revolves around ourselves and our own lives. When I meet a potential sales target, do you know what I do? I look into their background. Are they married? Do they have kids or pets? Where did they grow up? What sports team do they root for? I make sure to sprinkle plenty of questions about these things into my conversation to put them at ease, to relax them. People love thinking about and talking about themselves. I'm offering them an instant conduit to feeling good about who they are, what they do, all that they have accomplished. It's ego stroking. As a salesperson, I'm constantly playing people, always looking for a way I can gain some livelihood out of the relationships. Remember, she's a salesperson who owns and runs a small business. I don't need to meet her to know that she's got to be adept at schmoozing and making her customers feel comfortable, appreciated, and listened to. But she's not selling anything to me, isn't she? You don't know what her ulterior motive is. This could be a play for a longer-term con. She's providing you information and helping you out. Just be prepared for the other shoe to drop on this. You never know. This could be a reciprocity thing. You've always been naive, always wanted to see the good in people, but this world is full of people with hidden agendas. And who's to say she doesn't have one? When he said that, I considered how I might also have been using Gail. And not just as a source for information and in-depth research about the occult, she was also an inspiration for writing. Because I hadn't slept when I got back home. Instead, I went right to my laptop and hammered out 6,000 words in the book I'd been previously blocked on. It had been weeks since I'd written more than a few hundred. The writing I was doing didn't even involve the Necronomicon, but Gail had kickstarted those creative juices in me like nothing ever had before. And I realized I'd been writing non-stop until the time I got the call from Buddy, asking if I was free to meet at a diner just down the street from the Algonquin for lunch. This was one of his quick in-and-out trips through town. I was running on a combination of adrenaline, at least a half dozen cups of coffee, the high of having spent the night engaged in the most dynamic conversation with a captivating and beautiful woman. This wasn't a work thing, I said. I'll bet it's a work thing for her. Understanding your agent like I do, I bet Max slipped her a few bucks to meet with you. Bullshit! I yelled. But he shook his head, picked up the white ceramic coffee mug, and held it in front of his mouth for a quick moment, staring at me quietly. His eyes took on a gravity I'd never seen him relay before. Listen, son, I know you're infatuated with this woman. I know she seems to have you under some sort of mystical spell. I can see it in your eyes. But please, just do me a favor and take this thing slow. If there's something there, there's no need to rush into anything. And maybe be careful what you share with her. Don't put too much trust in her or too much stock in what's being delivered on the surface. This woman sells things for a living. You might be advised to play your cards close to your chest. She'll likely be able to see things about you that you don't want to be known. Everybody has a past. Some sort of things best left in the dark. Try not to share too much about yourself in these conversations. I thought about what Buddy said. And, as he sometimes did, it felt like he was trying to tell me something without telling me something. He sometimes spoke in riddles, confusing riddles, but often with a hidden message. He didn't know about my werewolf curse, but over the years he occasionally referenced things that made me wonder if he really knew the truth and was keeping it such a tightly guarded secret that he wouldn't even put that out in the air between us. And he couldn't know I'd been thinking about revealing my secret to Gail. Who else in this city would actually believe me if not an expert on the occult? Also, sharing this curse with someone who could understand and perhaps help me understand what I was also appealed to me. He glanced at his watch and put his coffee back down. Geez. I've got to go. I need to be about 20 blocks from here. Then I need to hit the highway for Philadelphia for a morning meeting there tomorrow. Go, I said to him, perhaps more briskly than I intended. I was angry at him for suggesting that Gail, a sharp, hot woman I was infatuated with, had an ulterior motive. I'll pick up the check. Thanks. I'm supposed to be back in the Big Apple before the end of June. This time for a longer stay. Maybe we can catch a Yankees game. I know a guy who can get us good seats. Buddy knew I didn't like sports, but that I did enjoy going to Yankee Stadium and soaking in the ambiance of the experience. It was always good for my writing. I also recognized this was his way of subtly apologizing to me for being such a downer about Gail. "Catch you later, Wolfman Jack," he said as he headed towards the exit. "And a word to the wise? Slow your roll." I was reminded of the various wolf nicknames he'd used for me over the years. It was his cheeky nod to the way we'd met on that lonely highway in upstate New York all those years ago. His car had shown up at just the right time to save me from a wolf attack, so Buddy thought it was funny to call me Wolfman or some variation on it. As I watched him stroll down the street, his portly body shuffling a lot faster than a man of his size should be able to comfortably move, I thought a bit about what he said, and about the call I'd made to Gail on my walk over to have lunch with Buddy. I told her I had a few more questions I'd like to ask about the Necronomicon, and remembering her love of hot and spicy food, I suggested a great Thai place that I'd been to several times. From the sound of her voice, she'd been really into it. It had been that feeling making me wonder if I should prepare by getting a pack of condoms. While there were more things I could ask her about the occult and that Lovecraft text, it would be intriguing to find out what she knew about werewolves. Using her to see if I could figure out more about my condition was as appealing as wanting to know what her lips tasted like, what it would feel like to hold her tight in my arms. But I also reflected on Buddy's words of concern. There was something in him referring to me as Wolfman and cautioning me not to reveal too much that created a disturbing sour pang in my gut and unsettled me. 7:14 p.m. Though I was pretty sure I was walking with an excited spring in my step, I had to keep reminding myself that I should proceed with extreme care tonight. I was still about a block from the Thai restaurant just south of the Flatiron District where I'd made a 7:30 reservation. It was basically a half-hour walk straight down either 6th or 5th Avenue from my place. Only, I realized less than 15 minutes had passed, and I was nearly there. I'd been walking really fast. Of course I was. I couldn't wait to see Gail again, to fall helplessly into those gorgeous green eyes, to imagine what it might be like to be staring into them from an inch away while our lips touched. I shuddered in delight at that thought. "Slow your roll." Buddy's words came back to me and I almost stopped in my tracks. What the hell had I been thinking earlier? I couldn't tell Gail about my werewolf nature. We'd just met. Sure, we'd talked for hours and traded stories back and forth, but we didn't know one another. How much could we learn about one another in that short time span? I told myself I should play it cool. I wouldn't tell her. In fact, giving her a keen sense of observation, I should do everything I could not to tip my hand at the extraordinary powers I have. With Gail's background and her insights into the occult and the paranormal, she, more than anyone else, would likely be able to somehow be onto me and onto my true nature. Curbing my enthusiasm would help. Maybe it would help to distance myself a bit, play it chill, and all the while try to ignore my natural instinct to rely on my enhanced wolf senses. I didn't drink much, and sometimes alcohol can help slightly mute my senses. So maybe I'd make an effort to get more alcohol in me as early as possible. Muting my sense of smell and hearing would help me be less intuitive, be less able to read her intense desire for me, because that, in and of itself, was a huge turn-on. Landing on that conclusion, I started walking again, this time with a fixed and forceful determination. I wasn't a schoolboy hoping to go on a date and get kissed by a cute girl. I was a professional man on a mission to get the information I needed for my book. "Just the facts, ma'am," I muttered as I walked, trying to conjure up the cold and emotional tone of Joe Friday from that old television show. The Dragnet tune played in my head as I continued my purposeful march down Broadway. But the music in my head stopped when I spotted her walking half a block ahead. She bisected Broadway in her walk west along East 19th Street. The restaurant we were meeting at was about halfway down that block. When I got to the corner, I was able to pick up her scent and paused for a moment to bask in it. Oh yes, I was so damn into this woman that just the scent of her set my heart racing. "Cool it. Slow your roll. Chillax." I wasn't sure if that was my voice or Buddy's. All I knew was that neither of us had ever used the term chillax before. Gail's voice drifted to me from up the street.
"Here you go,"
she was saying. I saw her bending over and speaking to an elderly woman sitting on the sidewalk, leaning against the brick wall. The woman and her clothes smelled of weeks-old sweat that carried all this way, and her face was lined and worn from a combination of age and stress. I know I tagged her as elderly, but she might have actually been no more than mid-40s based on the beat of her heart. "Thank you, sweetheart," the woman said. Her voice was dry and gravelly.
"What's your name, love?"
"Mary?"
"Nice to meet you, Mary. My name's Gail. This $20 bill is all I have on me. I don't carry much cash. But I can order you something from inside and bring it out. I also own a store on Avenue B near Tompkins Square Park. It's called Enchanting Magic. We open at 9 o'clock tomorrow. If you come by, I'll have more for you and some fresh clothes. We only have a few t-shirts, but I'm sure I can find something in your size."
"God bless you, ma'am," Mary said, choking on the tears of appreciation.
"Please call me Gail."
"God bless you, Gail." I stopped walking, not wanting to get too close, so that Gail saw me as they discussed what food Gail might be able to order and bring out for her. When it was decided and Mary thanked her again, Gail got down on one knee, leaned in, and hugged Mary. Then she got up, said she'd see her soon, and walked up the street and into the entrance of the restaurant. I shook my head. How the heck was I going to be able to play it cool for someone so incredibly compassionate and thoughtful like that? You've been listening to Lover's Moon, a paranormal romantic comedy by Mark Leslie and Julie Strauss. Read by the authors. Lover's Moon is book 5 in the Canadian Werewolf Series, published by Stark Publishing and available in print, ebook, and audiobook. The music used in this production, Waltz Primordial by Kevin MacLeod featuring Alexander Nakarada, was licensed via Incomptech.com and is copyrighted by Kevin MacLeod.